Well, hey there. It's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol. That's wavetables.lol. Home of KRC Mathwaves, my gigantic collection of single-cycle waveforms, wavetables, and even samples for all sorts of modern synthesizers. And we're hearing the sounds of a new synth by Madrona Labs called Sumu. And Sumu is a resynthesis kind of synthesizer that is very good at making all sorts of drony things like we're hearing right here, but has many other applications, I think. It's not complete yet, and I feel like it sort of got lost in all of the news last week from Superbooth, but it's definitely worth your time and attention, and we'll talk a little bit about it. I think one of the best ways to get to grips with this thing would be to, whoa, hey now, let's just get rid of that, shall we? I guess one of the best ways to get to grips with this thing would be to go and read its manual. Anyway, go to Madrona Labs and check out Sumu. You can download it. It does have a trial version. I bought it because in the same way that I bought Myth, I want to support people who are doing, interesting stuff with resynthesis. Now, Sumu is a lot more successful with resynthesis than Myth was. And also, its marketing is not like completely out of control silly. So this right here is a sample from the original tapes that were used in the backing vocals for I'm Not in Love. And you can hear that Sumu is actually able to reproduce this quite well. It's sort of a strange sound, but it's, different from playing back just the native sample, because one of the things that we can do with resynthesis, right, is separate time, timbre, and pitch. And so you can do that in Sumu. Also, I had shown with Myth things like this sample of Maurice White from Earth, Wind, and Fire. Some ooze, multi-tracked ooze. And sorry, it's really pretty sounding stuff, right? You can make more chaotic sounding stuff as well. But anyway, Myth could not reproduce either of these samples very well, whereas Sumu does a much better job and has a much more sophisticated approach to resynthesis. So where should we start? I mean, I guess with maybe like a few examples. So you heard the droney type thing. You heard another kind of pad type sounds. Very good at drones and pads. Here is another vocal sample. These are this is a Mellotron sample, right? I guess part of the quote-unquote factory set. Let's turn off our reverb. What I also wanted to show is that, oh, that's a little bright. What I wanted to show is that Sumu works great with effects. It doesn't have a big effects rack built into it. It really has sort of three tricks. So one it can resynthesize samples, okay? Two, it has this kind of complicated modulation thing that generates pulses that are basically stochastic or random. And you can use that to modulate all sorts of different things. And then it has spatialization. So there's a space module down here that's not, and the interface is nicely scalable. This is not really a reverb. It's more like an early reflections thing. Let me just turn off all the effects here. And what we're seeing is a visualization here, he was trying to say, of the different partials in space. And so it can put different partials at different points in a sound field, and can produce like early reflections based on that. And there also is like Doppler shifting. So like as these things are whizzing around us, they are subtly changing in pitch. And you can also see that they're being modulated a bit with noise. And this creates kind of interesting sort of chorusy type effects. Here's another version of this that's based on one of the factory patches. And the factory patches are pretty cool in this because you can successfully take most of the factory patches and put a different sample in there, and they will sound kind of useful. So in this version, we're using the space module to kind of get some sort of chorusing and vibrato effects, really tremolo. Very kind of strange, right? You've probably never heard anything quite like that. I think. So this benefits quite a bit from, adding some, we've got some delay going on here. I'm using Audio Damage Other Desert Cities, which is another plugin that's super worth your time, I think. This is kind of a backward delay. And then I'm also using today a bunch of Airwindows things. So I talked in a previous video about, whoa, that was loud, a previous video about the new Airwindows Consolidated plugin, which is really a set of about 400 different VST plugins across all types of things, including this really beautiful and interesting reverb called Galactic that's great for these, droney type things, and I think works great with Sumu. I mean, I think that's just beautiful, right? Lots of neat things that you can do here. I mostly just wanted to point out that this thing exists, I think. That's funny. This label is blank. I don't know what I clicked to get that. That's really funny. Hilarious. So Sumu, I think felt to me like it needs more exposure. It's super interesting. It does have a trial mode, which every some seconds like fades all of the sound to noise, which is a little bit annoying. I thought it was like just super neat, and so I licensed it pretty quickly after having tried the demo. We'll get into more about how you actually get samples into this thing. And then I also want to talk about some new stuff that's in KRC Mathwaves that is a relatively small edition. And by small, I mean it's only 729 new wavetables, but using a split technique. So the theme of our talk today is splitting stuff. So here in Sumu, we are splitting things into their partials. And then in the latter half of this video, we'll get into KRC Mathwaves and some wavetables that were built by splitting basic synthesis waveforms apart in interesting ways. And it's just a coinkydink that these two things are related in this way. I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll be back and we'll talk about more stuff with Sumu, which is just super cool. You know, like and subscribe for more talkie synthesizer content. And also, everything I'm talking about today, there'll be links in the description down below. We're over 600 subscribers on my channel now, and I'm very happy about that. Welcome, new subscribers. Now, with Sumu, we can't just drag a sample into the partials component here. We have to analyze it first. And so Sumu is two components. There's the VST synth part that runs in your DAW. It doesn't have a standalone mode. Again, I don't so much care about that, but you might. So anyway, it needs a DAW to run. And then there's a companion app that's called Vutu. And Vutu is the analyzer component. And interestingly, Vutu is open source. And the power of this, the resynthesis technique used in Sumu, is made very apparent by working with Vutu. And we'll talk about like how to make this thing work and how to get your samples in a minute. But I want to play I want to play an original sample.
A simple break.
A simple break.
A simple break.
And you can model even these kind of like vocal slogans, I call them, vocal samples. Listen to the resynthesized one.
A simple break. A simple break.
Here's the resynth.
A simple break.
I mean, it's practically the same thing. And you'll note that this resynthesis technique that's called Loris is even able to model the noise. So Loris, I will put a link to this, but Loris is described here. And it turns out that that fellow Haken of Haken Fingerboard fame actually worked on this. Was involved in some of the papers about Loris. But Loris uses something called reassigned bandwidth enhanced additive sound modeling. And basically what that means is that it doesn't just identify the partials, which are the harmonics in the sound that it analyzes. It's looking at the way they change, and it's also looking at the noise. And so the tonal components and the noise are sort of modeled separately, and so it can do
a simple break
like this.
A simple break.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I want to save this. And so we'll do export.utu. We'll talk about what .utu is. Let's see, there's my resynth folder. Let's go to slogans, and we'll save a simple break, which I hadn't analyzed before. Okay, so when you open Vutu, it's just a thing you extract, and there's a little exe, and you just run it. I've got it pinned to my start menu so that I can find it easily. When you run it, it will be set to various defaults, and you can return things to the default settings by just double-clicking on the little dials here. And we'll talk about what they do to the extent that I know what they do. When you open this thing, you can go and open a sample. Let's go get a new, just completely arbitrary sample. Let's try a shorter one. Let's see, what's this? This will be some sort of hit. Oh, that sounds challenging. Okay, that's pretty groovy sample. And then what we can do is, again, I set these all back to their defaults. We click the Analyze button. And what this does is it runs an analysis on our sample, and then once it's analyzed, we can synthesize it, and then we can play what it came up with. Now you can hear that the resynthesized version is a lot duller, and it's not really awesome like that previous sample was, right? Because I've done some work on it. The things that you can do here, there's a couple of considerations. So one, in Sumu, you have to have an analysis that only has 64 or fewer maximum active partials. Okay, it doesn't matter how many like total partials that Vutu identifies. You just have to get it down to lower than 64 max active partials. And one way we can increase the number of partials that get detected is by moving this window frequency. And so for a short sample, sometimes a lower window frequency is better. Sometimes a longer window frequency is better for a longer sample. This one's kind of mid-size. We're just going to, instead of having it at the default of 80, let's just listen to the effect of moving the window frequency up. We'll analyze it, we'll synthesize it, and then we'll play. So we're getting a little closer, and you'll see that we have a maximum of 57 active partials. If we move the resolution down, what this does is it changes the shortest distance that the analysis can use on the different partials. And so if we move it down, we might get a more accurate rendering of this sample. So we'll analyze again and synthesize. That's not bad. You note that symbol is kind of tough to do. Another thing we can do is there's this amp floor setting, and the amp floor says disregard partials that are lower than this cutoff value. So we're like 60 dB down here. Since we have a little room to work with, we could dial this down a bit, and let's see what the analysis is like. Now we've got 93 active partials. Does it sound better though? I mean, this is I think an SP 1200 kind of sample, so it's already like fairly damaged. So that's pretty cool. The other thing we can do to reduce the number of active partials is there's a high cut here, and there's also a low cut. So these are filters, right? So you can filter out low end if we want. We can filter out high end. Filtering out high end will tend to have a dramatic effect on the number of partials that are identified. So you're seeing here that in the current analysis, we've got more than 1,000 partials. The maximum frequency of them is 19,000 plus hertz. But if we moved our high cut down and we reanalyzed, we're going to cut out a lot of the higher partials. And so now we've got a max active of 84. We're just going to try to get this to like 64-ish. So there's 71. And that doesn't sound too bad. I mean, I wish it were a little higher. I'm going to like just change that to there. I want a little more of the high frequency content in there. And then there's kind of this mysterious setting called frequency drift. And so with frequency drift, this kind of controls how the partials get played back. It's very subtle. And a lot of times moving it to a low value will greatly reduce the number of active partials, but it could damage the audio a little bit. Let's see, analyze, synthesize. So, you know, we're getting there. What happens if we move this very low? Okay, now we're down to 68 active partials. And I think that made it a little more grainy. So actually this sample requires a little higher frequency drift. The other thing we can do now to greatly reduce the partials, now that we're kind of in the zone, is we can move this window frequency up a bit. Let's try it at 276. Got us to 72. 69. And sometimes higher values are actually just better. There we go. So we're kind of, how do we feel about this? I mean, this is a very challenging sample, right? But let's go, now that we're at 56 max active partials, we could move our amp floor down and reanalyze. Ooh, 66, I went a little too far. There we go. So again, the reason that we're doing this, if I didn't explain it very well, is that, oh, those are close enough for jazz. That's the original. There's the resynthesized part. The reason that we're doing this is that we've got to get our maximum active partials to 64 or lower, right? Okay, so once you have this thing analyzed, what you can do is you can export it. There's one other thing that you can change, which is the tuning. Now, this is, you know, kind of a musical phrase. And so it doesn't it doesn't have a clear base frequency. But this fundamental setting over here tells us, is going to tell Sumu where this sample is mapped on the keyboard. So I have to be honest, one of the things that I've kind of been doing when I've been importing my own samples is I'm like, if I've got one that's in A, that's A, I'll use A instead of one of the other ones, like something that's mapped to like F or C, because we know that A is at 440-ish, so it's either going to be at 220, 440, or 880. But anyway, what we can do is we can set the tuning on our sample. It's a little bit tweaky. You'll see that as I'm using my scroll wheel here, and as I scroll this dial, there's this line that's moving, and so this is setting the fundamental frequency of what the sample is. And it looks like there's a pretty strong fundamental right here, whatever 664 is. And we can actually turn up this dial. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully my big fat head's not in the way. It's called fundamental volume. And so this is a little tuning aid. And so this just plays a sine wave at the whatever frequency we have selected. And we could play back our sample, and that is actually, there is something there at about that frequency. And then you turn that down so that you don't drive yourself bananas. Sorry about that sine wave. And then once you've got your sample analyzed, you can export it to this .utu. So Sumu is apparently a Finnish word for fog, and apparently there are other Finnish words for fog and mist. And another one of these is called Utu. And so hence the name for this app, which is Vutu. And there's a cute extension on the files. It's .utu. So you click export, and then you can export your resynthesized sound somewhere. Let's go, we'll put this under Premiere Beats because that's where it came from. And we'll save the .utu file. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is the .utu files are actually just the data about the sample. And this analysis. And so it's just a text file. It's a JSON file, and you can open them in VS Code. So one thing that's kind of interesting is if we did figure out that we got this fundamental frequency wrong, I'm not, for hits like this, I don't really care, but we could open it in a text editor, like in VS Code. And so let's go to our resynth folder. Let's see, let's just look at that one. So is that the last sample we did? Yeah, there it is. So here's what the .utu file looks like. See, it's just JSON. And so it just describes the thing. And so you see, here's the fundamental. And for whatever reason, it's not exactly an integer. So we could edit this later if we figured out, oh, this would be a lot better at, say, 664. I do think that one improvement here, and this app I don't think is really done yet, one nice thing would be if you could select the fundamental by musical key and then plus or minus cents. That might make more sense because like things like Synonym and other sample librarians will actually show you what the root pitch of something is. It might also be cool if it had a little algorithm to do the root note detection. That might be helpful rather than having to manually do it. But anyway, blah, 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 blah. It is open source. And so it is possible that other people could contribute to the Vutu project and do other things. Like one thing you saw me kind of, thrashing around with finding settings for our sample. And I hope I explained those well enough. You get the app and get into it, and you'll learn pretty quickly. Also, Randy from Madrona Labs, the mind behind Madrona, has a video. It's about a year old, but it does show him doing the same things. And also, it's documented in the manual, although the noise width parameter isn't quite documented. There's so much to say about this synth, right? That we're not making sounds and doing fun things, but it's cool. I like this app. I love the retro, kind of green phosphor effect. It makes you feel like you're working in, I don't know, like a Fairlight or something, right? Or what's the wavetable builder for the Waldorf synths? Anyway, it reminds me of that, and it's kind of neat. Now you can also export your processed waves should you want to. I don't really know why you'd want to do that, because we're not going to use the wave version with Sumu. We're going to use the .utu file. But if you came up, if you mangled your sample in this thing and you thought it was interesting, you wanted to reuse it in some other sampler, you could export it. What I was saying is, I do think that one interesting enhancement here would be to like get a sample like close to where you want it, and then let this program like do some iterations to get you to 64 active partials, and then maybe give you like 5 different examples, right? And then you could go, oh, this one is closest, and kind of this one feels best to me. Like the manual says, you have to kind of make some creative choices sometimes with samples. Now, other times samples like will process perfectly, and you don't feel like you're making any trade-offs at all. It's quite a powerful system. All right. So anyway, blah blah blah. Once I've got a new Utu file, I can use it in Sumu. I'm going to go and get my own default patch. This is kind of my version of the init patch. And one thing that's a little different about my init patch than the one that comes with Sumu is that the one that's in Sumu, let's look at that real quick. It does sort of a dumb thing. Like it maps pitch to time. And so if you put, let's go put like a vocal. No, let's put a slogan in here. If you put like a simple break, like we were listening to before, right?
A simple break. A simple break.
It chipmunks.
A simple break.
Because they haven't disconnected
A simple break.
time and pitch. I'm like, I don't understand why you'd want to do that, really.
A simple break.
A simple break.
A simple break.
Right? So you should really undo that modulation. So I have my own default patch that separates time and pitch. There are reasons that you might want to do that, but generally for stuff like this, you wouldn't want to. Okay, so we've got a new resynthesis file. And let's see, Premier Beats 14104. It's this one that we just did. So that's the thing that we were just working on. And it's reasonable quality being played back, but again, we can do cool stuff. Right? We can play it back with different timings by adjusting the time parameter here. We can even play it back really slow. And that's kind of interesting just in itself, right? And that's kind of how I made those drones we were listening to at the beginning. Right? So you take a sound like this, and then you add, a delay. We'll add, let's see, move this down. We'll add this Airwindows effect called Seriously 2. That's a huge stereo expander. And then we'll add some of our friend Galactic to it. Really cool infinite-ish reverb. And that just becomes really, really interesting. I mean, welcome to my new album. It's now available on Hearts of Space Records. Pretty cool stuff. There's a lot more to talk about with this synth, but I did want to get through Vutu like we did. Once you have things analyzed, you can use them backward. Now, we could have reversed the sample in this case, like before we imported it. But you can set the time parameter backward. And that's what that sounds like. There's all this stuff that you can do with spatialization of the sound. So you see that we've got the partials here. Should maybe make this bigger, eh? I've got the partials here visualized, and we can see them floating around in space. And like I was saying, this module, while it does early reflections, it's not really a reverb. Like it has an anechoic mode, right? So there's no echo. And we're just hearing those partials playing back like that. But then if we select one of these rooms, we'll also hear some early reflections. And like orchestral stuff like this can work really well in Sumu. Let's see, let's do this. This is more like what the original sample sounds like. Pretty nifty. What's this one? Just another variation on that. In that original drone that I was playing at the opening in this video, it's based on this sample called Calling, and I'll let you listen to what that sounds like. Let's go to KRC default patch, and then let's put Calling in here. I kind of miscategorized it. I accidentally put it in the Vox section that's already with where's voices, noises, synthetic slogans, test tones. What is going on? Is there a limit to the number of things you can see? It might be. Where is it? That's, oh boy. This demo's going completely awry. I'm trying to like teach you something cool, right? And I can't find it. Oh, it's under vocals. Okay. Yeah, I know. All right, let's go see if we can find our vocals. I might have just found a funny limitation. Oh yeah, it's not showing vocals. So I think this might be a bug, because now I guess I've got enough folders in that resynthesis folder that it's not showing me the vocals folder. That's pretty annoying. Well, that's a little bug. Again, this is not a finished synthesizer. Now, I don't think it's ever going to have like a kind of normal synth voice to it, but there are some things that are coming. And so I know I'm jumping around, but this reminded me of something I wanted to talk about, which is that when you're on the page about Sumu, so here at Madrona Labs, Sumu page is where you can download the plugin, and also the Vutu companion app. You can buy it here. It's $129. I think it's worth the money. I think the finished product is going to have a little more range than we have here right now, but it's really cool, right now, I think, for some of the kind of things I want to do. There is a note here about what's coming. So the finished product will have a bigger sound library with more partials. I don't really care if they do that or not, because there's Vutu and I have all sorts of ideas about things that I want to throw in there and process. It will have MPE support. It'll have alternate tunings in a unison mode that is not hooked up yet. The dials will have numerical entry. There'll be LFOs and MIDI learn. LFOs would be greatly appreciated here, because really kind of the only modulators we have right now are the envelopes, which are very interesting, and the pulses module, which is also very interesting, but it's very complex. The envelopes, by the way, the manual makes a big deal about this, but when you're doing this patching, the envelopes, for example, work on all of the partials. And so there are interesting effects that you can do by changing the envelope scaling per partial and stuff. It just gives slightly different effects. And so basically when you take these outputs, there's low, all, and high. So all means all the partials are going to go to this module for control of the amplitude. The ADSR is actually per partial. And so you can do these kind of weird scaling things and stuff like that. I don't really want to go into that today. But then you've also got you could have the lowest note that you're playing, the highest note you're playing. Other things to mention about this, and why are we not listening to something? Maybe we should try to listen to something. Let's take one of the built-in drones, shall we? As I was saying, you can do stuff like just swap out different samples, and you'll often get very interesting and different results. Back to one of my patches. Let's see here. Let's go back to... Oh, actually, let's go back to that initial drone. So we already heard what this guy sounds like. But it can sound very different if you just put a different sample in. So, like, let's go and get that. So here's a little trumpet phrase. And so this drone takes on a very different character now. And you're hearing it like without effects. But if we put our effects on this, it's just like, a completely different character, but, definitely in that kind of same universe of sound. Boy, I've just been all over the place today. Now, this will just keep playing itself. You can do patches that will just play themselves. It's a very CPU-hungry VST. You'll see that my CPU meter here is very close to pegging the maximum. You select the number of voices in use over here. It will go as high as 16, but on my system, which is fairly beefy, it'll crap out with 16 in most patches. So it's definitely a CPU hungry synthesizer, but there's a lot going on here with the individual partials, etc. Okay, so a couple more things that I should probably mention about Sumu that I did not cover before, like a Dodome. It does have FM, and so there's this whole FM section that's in the oscillators part. And so now I'm usually kind of nonplussed by FM, but it can be interesting in some of these patches and in conjunction with these resynthesized sounds that Sumu does. For example, we're back in our Mellotron Choir Girls patch, and if I go down here, I can select a FM modulation ratio. I've got it set low here, and we could move the index up, and you'll hear that as we do that, that's gonna bring in like a lower tone. So I guess one interesting thing we could do with this patch, you've got kind of a modular style keyboard input thingy over here, and so you can take this mod, which would typically be used for like any sort of modulator, but it could be like your mod wheel. You could take mod and we could connect that, I guess, to like modulation index, and see, then we select which modulator we want to use. One would be mod wheel, and you'll see this little red dot. It lights up, so it's off. My mod wheel is all the way down. It'll light up brighter as we increase the mod parameter, and then we could give mod index some modulation, maybe like this. And as I move my mod wheel, I'm adding this lower frequency to the sound. So that's pretty cool. So it has FM. That is useful. There's another thing that I wanted to show in this original drone. Let's go back to this thing called Calling Drone. And I've got my exterior effects off, so we're just hearing the original sound. One thing that's kind of cool with the spatializer down here is that it does have this parameter called theta that is not modulatable in the synth, but it rotates the whole room. And I think you can hear, if I whip that around, there really is a Doppler effect that happens. So there's not just an amplitude shift, but also a pitch shift that happens. And so we could modulate that. I'm in Bitwig We could use a modulator on that. So I've added a wavetable LFO here, and I've loaded in one of my Bezier-Vey wavetables. So these are wavetables that were created by some AI systems that I created and trained. And what we can do is we can connect that to the theta parameter, and now you'll see, like, as this wavetable LFO is being traversed, we're moving the theta parameter around. Make this a little bit bigger, and you can see it, and you can hear that effect. And that creates like a lot of kind of extra subtle detail. And then if I turn my effects back on, it really adds to that whole texture. And it's fun to watch it go. And the manual says that the displays and such, there's also scope over here. We're looking at the noise output, but we could look at the pitch output. You can kind of visualize what you're doing in interesting ways. And these update, I guess, up to 60 times a second if you've got a beefy enough system. Anyway, those are two other little cool things about Sumu that are worth mentioning. Anyway, like I say, I'm going to have to come back to this synth and talk more about it, particularly once it grows another couple of features, but it's very useful right now. Okay, that's that. How long have I been talking at you today? Gosh, I'm probably not actually going to get to talking about new things in KRC Mathwaves. Maybe we'll just leave the split wavetables for my next video. Like and subscribe. Go check out Sumu and Vutu. Go play with them. They're very interesting. If you are into novel synthesis techniques like resynthesis, I encourage you to buy this. Also, obviously, once again, just go get Airwindows Consolidated, which is a super awesome collection of plugins that do amazing things, and it's getting updated all the time. Like, I even just installed it today. I wonder if I can find this. I don't know where you put distance. There's a new thing called distance that I'm not sure where it lives. Well, there's a pretty new thing called discontinuity. Maybe distance isn't in here yet. I don't know. Is it an ambience? Hard to say. I'll have to find that. That I thought was very interesting. We could talk about that. There's a really cool EQ in here called Air. It's so awesome for like adding just high frequency, just air back into things. And that sounds great. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. I will do some more stuff probably on Sumu in the future, especially once it gets some new features. Let's get rid of that. Well, that's a little hot. Anyway, go get all these things. Have fun, like and subscribe. I'll be back soon with more talky synthesizer content. For now, it's your old pal Keith from wavetables.lol saying, have a great day. Bye-bye.